Hi guys, hope everyone's well and welcome back to the education section. So this episode is going to be on minimising poor sessions. The reason why I'm basically creating this episode is the fewer poor sessions we can have, the more muscle tissue we can build while gaining, and the more muscle tissue we can build or retain while we are dieting. So as a result, regardless of what phase we're in, if we can have more productive sessions more consistently, usually we will visually look better, we will get better results from it. And the reason why I say look better is because sometimes in a fat loss phase that might mean your body weight doesn't drop as much, because you might be, let's say, building muscle during the process, especially if you're new to training or throughout the early stages of a dieting phase. It's definitely possible to do so. So yeah, looking better doesn't always equate to being lighter. And if, let's say, we can perform better when we're in a dieting phase, we're going to have more muscle at the end of it, which will mean we will be burning more calories at rest on a daily basis due to basically muscles demanding calories to just stay on our frame. And as well as that, if we can make sure that we are maintaining as much muscle or building as much muscle as we can, we will just look better, because a more heavily muscled individual will usually look like they have more shape, they'll look cleaner, they'll look more toned. And the reason being is, if, let's say, you've got, like, let's say, big shoulders, a big back, and let's say big quads, you'll have the illusion of, let's say, a smaller waist, for example. And in terms of how we measure good performance and how we ensure good performance, so good performance on my end is when you can progress and maintain your lifts effectively, obviously depending on what phase you're in and what part of the phase you're in. But for the most part, it's very rare that we should be just maintaining. Even dieting, I believe we can still progress our lifts. Obviously, it depends how lean you're getting, what stage of the dieting phase you're in, and how consistent you are outside the gym will influence that. But yeah, so a good session is one where we can maintain or progress performance, not one where we necessarily get a pump, not one where we usually train super hard and get a good sweat on. They're not good metrics for performing well, because you can jump in a sauna, sweat, that doesn't mean you're building muscle. You could go for a run and be super tired, that also doesn't mean you're building muscle. So what we should do to measure good performance is how is our performance, or how to know if we've had a good session is how are we performing. Are we progressing our lifts? Are we maintaining our lifts? Are we stimulating the desired body part effectively? Yeah, so poor sessions don't just happen for no reason. Sometimes, like very, very rarely, they can, but usually there's underlying reason behind it. And they can happen due to like a lack of consistency or effort in some areas, which I'll get to. So the more variables you can control, the more boxes you can tick outside the gym effectively, meaning the more you can nail all your variables, the fewer poor sessions you'll have. They are somewhat controllable. You can control if you're going to have a poor session or not by your consistency outside the gym. Because we know it's not just what we do inside the gym, it's what we do outside the gym that will ensure we progress. So typically, what I believe poor sessions can happen due to is lack of effort, mindset being in a good spot, suboptimal nutrition, having poor sleep quality and or duration, poor exercise setup and execution, and exercise programming being poor. And I'm going to go through every single one, highlighting some points that you could consider in regards to why you didn't have a good session and how you can potentially put it in a better spot for the future. So first one is lack of effort. As you get stronger and stronger, progression somewhat get harder to come by. The weight will feel heavier, although you can, but let's say progress. If, let's say, you're progressing your exercise like a barbell back squat, eventually, like, regardless of the weight, it just feels difficult. You feel like you're gonna get crushed, regardless if, let's say, you've got 5 reps there in the tank or a rep there in the tank. It still feels difficult. So progressions will become harder to come by the more you've been training, the longer you've been in the gym progressing for. Because if, let's say, you go in the gym the first time, because it's that new to you, progressions will be super easy. It'll be super easy to progress your lifts. Whereas if you've been in it for 5 years, a lift's going to be much more demanding and difficult to progress. So as you get stronger, it will be harder to progress movements. So that means it will require more effort and consistency to progress them. So if, let's say, you got away with half-assing effort when you're first getting into the gym, you may have. But now that you're, let's say, more let's say further into your training career, you are more experienced, effort's probably going to be harder, and effort can be the bottleneck of progress, because I've had many times a client sends me form clips and they say they regress or they struggle to progress their exercises, but I look at the form clip and they either don't attempt another rep, or they make a poor attempt, meaning they try it for a second but then give up too soon, and also, as well as that, their last rep that they do is fast, which tells me they've got more in the tank, which is fine if you're in that situation. It's fine. It's something that you can work on, however. And what I mean by that is, like, it takes time to practice training hard, but just make sure it's something you always try and do. I've not that there isn't people more experienced than me, but just for example, I've trained for like 5 years now. I still try and train harder, and that's after obviously spending 10 years before that doing judo at a reasonable level. And what I mean by that is, like, effort takes time. Even if you've done a sport beforehand and you've pushed yourself in that sport, effort takes time to develop effort while maintaining good form. So it may be extreme. This is a really extreme example, but it gets the point across. If someone had a gun to your head and told you do another rep, or they pull the trigger, would you get another rep? It is very extreme, a bit over the top, and you might think it's a weird example, but it just puts a point across of, could you give more effort to your sets? Could you have got that extra rep if someone did do that to you? If so, that's what we kind of want to have in terms of our effort level in every single set when it comes to the gym, because it will ultimately show in our results. So every single set is an opportunity to get better, opportunity to progress and improve your body composition. So make sure each one you're giving maximum effort. And next is a poor mindset. So a big part of progression in the gym is the right mindset. And you hear about this with, like, athletes in other sports at a high level. Usually the ones at the top aren't ones that are like, oh, I might win, I'm not sure. I'll see how I'm feeling on the day. I'm not sure if I'll do well. They're confident. They've got confidence in their ability. Most athletes at the top of any sport. So if you go into your sets thinking, I'm not sure if I'll be able to progress it, I'll see how I do, I'm not feeling the best of the day, I'll try, you're probably not going to progress your sets. If you go in with some aggression, high level of energy and confidence, and in the right headspace, and telling yourself, I'm going to lift this, I'm not, let's say, leaving the set without progressing it, I'm going to do this, it's just down to me, and you tell yourself the weight's light, it's easy, then it's going to be, to an extent. So the progression is ultimately, a large extent, a choice. And it's a choice in terms of your effort and your mindset, and it's yours to make. So go into sets wanting it, telling yourself you'll get that rep, that you're not leaving without it, and that the weight's light, and tell yourself, like, positive affirmations, like why you should be doing it. Like, if, like, there's folk around you who's lifting more, just be like, they're doing it, so why can't I? Or tell yourself, right, I've been so consistent outside the gym, I've ticked all my boxes, so it's going to move, it's going to progress. So yeah, part of it's a poor mindset. See, if you tell yourself you've not got another rep, you probably won't get it. I've had it time and time again. Whenever I've got a bit of doubt, whenever, like, doubt sets in, it really impacts your ability to progress your lifts. So yeah, like I said, it's shown again. People, like, at top of sports, high level, they go in, they've got, like, a positive mindset. They've got a lot of confidence. And same with people who are, let's say, even if you're not a bodybuilder, people who, let's say, bodybuild, and they are got to, like, a high level, they believe in their ability inside and outside the gym. And next up, after mindset, is suboptimal nutrition. So if your nutrition's not in a good spot, that can affect our ability to perform when it comes to our sessions. I'd say more so pre-workout. Post-workout, like eating after your session, in other words, is still important for your ability to recover for your next session, but pre-workout's probably going to have a greater impact on performance on that day, because obviously your pre-workout's before your session. What you eat after isn't going to affect the session that you've just done, to an extent, obviously. It's going to affect maybe progressions in the long term, and the next time you go in the gym, but not that direct session, because obviously you've already done it. So when it comes to our nutrition, it's important we're consuming adequate amount of calories in each macronutrient so that we can perform well. Specifically short term, total calories and carbohydrates are kind of what matters most. Carbohydrates are our main source of energy. We utilise them best for energy, more than carbs and fats. So having like some pre-workouts a great spot to be in, 70 to 80 grams worth, ideally. And also fat slows the digestion of carbohydrates, which means you don't release carbs as fast if you've got if you've got fat in your meal or in your diet. So it's great to maintain steady blood sugar levels, which is what we want, because when blood sugar drops during training, which is influenced by carbohydrates, so can energy and performance, meaning we want to keep it elevated, and we want a steady release of carbohydrates and fat to keep it elevated throughout our sessions. And also it's a good idea to just in general accompany meals with protein, which helps us recover, build muscle tissue. But yeah. So what I'd say is, if you want to follow those guidelines, that will be absolutely magic, having like 25 grams of protein, 10 to 15 grams of fat, and 70 grams of carbohydrates before your session. It does mean some of your meals at other points of the day you might not be able to eat as much, which can be a bit more difficult if you're dieting, but it's going to have a massive effect on your ability to perform. And it's also important we go into sessions hydrated through having appropriate water and electrolyte consumption. And what that will basically look like is salting your meals and having your urine close to clear. And that's going to mean when you step in the gym, you're going to definitely be able to perform well. And there's no doubt about it. And there's also videos on things like nutrition and hydration in the education section as well, so be sure to check them out if you want to learn more. I'm kind of just touching on the areas. I'm not going like a really deep dive into each just for the purpose of this video. On that topic, next up is sleep, which I do have a few educational videos on in regards to the importance of it, how to sleep effectively, and the importance of, let's say, your sleep and wake time. So poor sleep can harm your ability to train, recover, and your motivation to train. I've got other videos on sleep, but some good basics to try and put in place is a consistent sleep and wake time, not having caffeine super late, not having it in crazy high amounts, and sleeping in a cool and lastly a dark environment is key. So yeah, the better we can sleep, the better we're going to perform when it comes to our sessions, and better we're going to recover, and the more our energy will be and our motivation to train will typically be higher. Nobody's motivation's through the roof when you're feeling absolutely drained and tired, really, or very rarely. So next up is exercise setup and execution. So when you're doing exercises in the gym, you want to set up and perform every single exercise with, let's say, the same form. And what I mean by that is you don't want to, let's say, just go through the motions when it comes to your warm-ups. You want to make sure when you're doing every exercise, your warm-ups, execution, and the machine settings are the same, just so you've got a standardized environment. Because if, let's say, you're constantly changing the height of a machine, that's going to change maybe how difficult or easy it is. It means progress won't be as comparable on a weekly basis, and you're not as used to that movement pattern. So make sure your setup and execution is the exact same on a weekly basis. Because if everything is the same, nothing will go wrong, or it will be much less likely to go wrong. So if you're not, let's say, creating maximum stability with the setup, bracing well and warming up effectively, then you aren't setting yourself up for success. I've also got a video in the education section on how to warm up effectively, which is very valuable, but basically what's good to do is taper your reps down as the weight gets heavier during your warm-ups. And also, when you're doing a movement, are you bracing well? Are you practicing your form on your warm-ups? Are you creating tightness with muscles that aren't working? For example, are you using leg drive when you're doing pressing movements? Are you keeping your feet planted? And are you maybe keeping your core tight when you're doing things like maybe a squat? And are you creating stability with like the barbell on your back by pulling the bar down? Things like that. So it's not just about what the working muscle's doing, it's about what's non-working muscle doing as well. And how can we basically create a more stable environment? Because the more stable we are, the more force we can simply produce. So next up is exercise programming. Obviously, you're currently under my wing, or you were under my wing in terms of being coached by myself, if you're probably watching this video. So these will hopefully not be in a bad spot. I am sure that I will have them all in a good spot. Sometimes they might not be. Sometimes we might, let's say, underestimate or overestimate what you can do or recover from, or maybe structure it in a way that's maybe not perfect. And there's no perfect way to structure a session as well. If, let's say, you have something before another movement, the other movement will suffer to an extent. So you can't have, let's say, a perfect setup, and it's about prioritization, because you can't prioritize everything at the same time. And what it says with exercise programming, are you doing a poor amount of volume to grant you progress? Are you doing too little or too much? For the most part, too much will mean you'll be sore going into the next session, or you will, let's say, not be fully committing to the sets you're currently doing due to having a high amount in total. And definitely, let's say you're doing too little sets, you might not be able to progress at as fast a rate you can. What I'd say is it's good to, let's say, be slightly below as much as you possibly can if you're new to training, because I'd rather see someone do less sets but try and get more out of them than do as much sets as they possibly can and let's say perform less effort. Because if you're new to training, you're probably not got the best ability to train hard. So it's good to, let's say, be on the slightly lower end so that you can work on your intensity. Next up, are you changing movements or missing sessions? If, let's say, you are changing movements, you're not letting yourself get the ability to get used to a movement pattern and progress your true level of strength on it. And with the missing sessions, we want to ideally repeat sessions frequently so that we have the ability to progress those movements, because if we miss them, we're not used to the movement pattern. We basically missed a week of potential progressions for that one session, unless we obviously do it on a different day. But it's good to try and get them done on the desired day, because if, let's say, we are, let's say, doing all 5 sessions without a rest day, then that's going to lead us to be fatigued going into each session, and maybe our muscles not fully recovered. So are you, let's say, repeating the same movements in the same order and ticking those sessions off on a weekly basis? If you, let's say, you are missing sessions every week, but you're annoyed about not progressing, then it is your own fault to an extent. Well, not to an extent, it is your own fault. If you want to, let's say, progress your lifts and maximize your progress, your actions should reflect that. So yeah, it's important to also have adequate recovery session, meaning enough rest in between it. For example, you don't want to train back on Monday and then go into Tuesday and train back again. You want a rest day in between, at least one really. And obviously some people could argue it's good to, let's say, or you can get away with training arms every day, that sort of thing, if your arms are a lagging body part. But your arms are like every other body part. Just because they're not super sore to touch, you might not want to, just so you are definitely fresh and you can do quality work heading into your next session. Also, are we managing central nervous system fatigue? So not doing too much and managing stress outside the gym. More so ticking our boxes outside the gym in terms of sleep, managing stress, because if you're new to training, you shouldn't worry about fatigue a lot. What you should worry about is recovery outside the gym more so, meaning not doing less, but just doing more in terms of doing more to recover, like sleeping well and managing your stress better, because most people can do so more effectively, and beginners don't really have to worry about, let's say, deloading when you're new to the gym, or they shouldn't, unless they're doing a lot wrong. And next up is exercise order. So are you doing movements in a poor order that's not allowing you to progress well? For example, if your first exercise is, let's say, you're doing, let's say, 4 sets in a double drop set, could you argue that that could be better placed later in the session, or you could distribute your volume more effectively, because those high intensity techniques and the amount of sets in your first set could be taken away from the movements later in the session. And exercise order is something valuable to look at. For example, you can put movements before others without sacrificing the following movements much. For example, if you put a lateral raise before doing a press, you're probably not going to sacrifice your performance during that press. If you're doing a adductor machine before doing a squat, you're probably not going to harm your performance when it comes to the squat much. So to conclude, the more we can control external variables outside the gym, the more likely we are to progress. From there, it comes down to your mindset and also effort in the gym. And what I'd recommend is go through almost like a checklist approach. Was your nutrition nailed? Are you sleeping well? How were your effort and mindset? Basically going through everything and thinking, what was in a good spot, what wasn't. And if you're really routined and you keep things the same, it'll be easy to see what is different. And if everything's nailed, some movements could have potentially just stalled, meaning they've stopped progressing, because you can't just keep progressing at the rate you can when you first do an exercise. Because if you keep putting, let's say, 5 kilos on a lift every single week, you'll eventually be lifting an absolutely ridiculous amount of weight and you'd have world records for that movement, whereas that's probably not possible long term. So it's about swapping it out if it's stalled for a long period, or creating novelty by changing maybe control you're lifting, maybe resetting that movement, or implementing a pause somewhere, or changing your grip to make it feel slightly different and to kind of create a bit of variation so you continue progressing it. So I hope this episode helped in regards to like handling poor sessions, why you have poor sessions and how to prevent them as much as possible, and hope everyone has a great rest of their day.